The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him.
Hello, welcome to our Bible study. My name is Clint and today we'll be in 1 Samuel chapter 20. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m. at the auditorium for services, so please join us if you can. Masks will be provided at the door for anyone who needs one. The elders are asking that everyone wear masks today and maintain social distancing. If you care to join us at 9 a.m., you can watch this Bible study on the big screen in the auditorium. Today's material and discussion will include topics regarding human sexuality that may be inappropriate for young children. Please consider this before showing this video to children. We want to promote this Bible from the World Bible School. It's an English Standard Version Bible. We're making this available to anyone who wants one, so if you care to have one, please call the church office and let them know, and we'll try to get one to you. Our hearts were heavy this week with the news of the passing of Jean Hart. I will miss seeing her and being encouraged by her kind words. As of this moment, arrangements for her funeral service are pending. As we do every week, I want to call into remembrance the story of the two men on the road to Emmaus who were joined by a third man on the way. Turns out that third man was Jesus, and when he left their presence, they noticed there was an absence of a burning in their hearts that had been present when he was with them. That burning in their heart is what we hope to kindle in our continued study of God's Word by drawing ourselves closer to God's will that we find in His Word. We also remember the admonitions of Leviticus 19 to be holy, for the Lord your God is holy, and we seek a knowledge of the Lord's will for us so that we might know what it is to be holy. And finally, the lessons we learn from the story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam about misusing the Word of God or modifying God's will for us to be more convenient for us. We know that this is a very bad thing. It can result in bad things not only for us, but for generations to come who are led away into false teaching because of something that can be introduced with nothing but the best of intentions to make things easier on us. God's will is God's will, and it should not be modified for our own personal convenience. There's also the lesson of the prophet in that story that I also take to heart. And it's why I remind you never to take my word at face value when it comes to what we talk about in these Bible studies. Consider me a liar. Check everything I say out against what God's Word says, and if you find that I am inconsistent with what you find in God's Word, I hope that you will bring that to my attention. 1 Samuel chapter 20 from the English Standard Version. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so." Verse 3, But David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." Verse 5, David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at table with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to return to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan." Verse 7, If he says, "Good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father?" Verse 9, and Jonathan said, "Far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, would I not tell you?" Then David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you roughly?" And Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go out into the field." So they both went out into the field. Verse 12, and Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day, behold, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not disclose it to you, and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father." Verse 14, "If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off everyone from the enemies of David from the face of the earth." Verse 16, and Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies." And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Verse 18, then Jonathan said to him, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap." Verse 20, and I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot to a mark. And behold, I will send the boy, saying, "Go find the arrows." If I say to the boy, "Look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them," then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. But if I say to the youth, "Look, the arrows are beyond you," then go, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. Verse 24, so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat, as at other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Yet Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, "Something has happened to him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean." But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty, and Saul said to Jonathan his son, "Why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Verse 28, Jonathan answered Saul, "David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason he has not come to the king's table.'" Verse 30, then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." Verse 32, then Jonathan answered Saul his father, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger, and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. Verse 35, in the morning Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to his boy, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy had come to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" Verse 38, and Jonathan called after the boy, "Hurry, be quick, do not stay." So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. Verse 40, and Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, "Go and carry them to the city." And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap, and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another, and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Verse 42, then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Okay, so in brief summary of the previous passages, David has been called to serve in the household of Saul as a player of the lyre to soothe Saul's ill moods that had begun once the Spirit of the Lord left him and the spirit of torment had come upon him. And while he was there, he became leader over a group of soldiers and would go out from the presence of the king before the people of Israel and fight their battles for them. So he became quite popular with the people. And this popularity with the people only served to make Saul even more jealous. So Saul arranged to have his daughters marry David. First he arranged to have his firstborn daughter marry David, but that fell apart. Then he arranged to have the secondborn marry David, and her name was Michal, and she did marry David. He did this not to draw David closer to him necessarily, but in order to put David in more danger in battle. My theory is, as the son-in-law of the king, he was more of a target to the Philistines than he would have been otherwise. But Saul definitely had designs other than the best interest of David in mind when he did this. Then in chapter 19, we see that David has figured out that Saul is trying to kill him, and he brings this petition to Jonathan to find out more details. Jonathan, of course, loves David as a brother, so he makes this arrangement with David to have David hide in the field, and he goes to his father and petitions his father, asks him what his intentions are. And Saul says that he intends to kill him, but Jonathan makes intercession for David and says, on what grounds? Why would you kill David? He's done nothing but bring good to you and your household. So he convinces Saul to spare David, and David comes back into the household of Saul. But it's a very short time before David again is threatened by Saul. Saul throws a spear at David, and David flees to elude Saul to his home, where he finds his wife warning him about the danger, which apparently he did not understand would be as great as his wife Michal explained it was. Michal helps him escape from their home. Saul challenges her because of it. My understanding is that she makes the statement that David threatened her, so she let him go, which was not true, but it spared her the wrath of her father. So we go on to find that David meets up with Samuel in Ramah, and they go to Naioth in Ramah, where Samuel has prophets, and as Saul sends messengers to recover David from Ramah, they all begin prophesying. This happens 3 times before Saul becomes frustrated and goes himself, at which point he himself becomes a prophet and prophesies naked before Samuel. And that's how the chapter ends and brings us on into chapter 20. Chapter 20 begins with David in Naioth, fleeing from Naioth, and he comes again to Jonathan, and he says to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my guilt? What sin have I committed before your father that he seeks my life?" So from David's perspective, he has no understanding of why Saul would be so angry with him. He's done nothing but bring glory and honor to Saul's household. He's Saul's son-in-law. Saul petitioned him to become his son-in-law. It's just a very odd thing from his perspective that Saul would be angry with him. Jonathan says, far from it. I've explained it to Dad, and he says he's not going to hurt you. Because that's what Jonathan understood. Now, Jonathan has a noble heart. He has a noble heart given over to trust, and it's one of the things I like about Jonathan. There seemed to be no deceit in him. He'd take a person at their word. If they said that they weren't going to kill you, he tended to believe that someone had no intentions to kill you. And unfortunately, this was misdirected toward his father's word. He tells David, hey, look, my father doesn't do anything without talking to me about it. So I think I would know if he really intended to kill you. But David goes on and says in verse 3, bowing, your father knows well that I've found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, don't let Jonathan know, lest he be grieved. So David understands that Jonathan's relationship with David is well understood by Saul at this point. And as a result, David understands that Jonathan would not necessarily be confided in by Saul in this regard. But truly as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. He makes it clear, I know that your dad's trying to kill me. I just don't know why. So Jonathan says to David, whatever you say, I'll do. I'll take your word for it. What do you want me to do? David says to Jonathan in verse 5, tomorrow's the new moon, and I will not fail to sit at table with the king. So it was the feast of the new moon, so he was expected to be presented before the king and eat at table with the king, which is just weird to me. Again, some of the things about royalty are lost on us as a people, but this expectation to go sit with someone who clearly has no good will towards you is just, it's hard to understand. So he says, but instead let me go that I may hide myself in the field, and then either tomorrow or the next day, if your father misses me at all, then you'll make excuse for me that I have gone to Bethlehem for a yearly sacrifice with my family. And if he says good, then we'll know that he's not really angry with me, and we can trust your instincts, Jonathan. He doesn't really want to kill me. But if he becomes angry, we'll know that his intent was to do me harm and he's frustrated. The frustration he shows will be an indication that he really wanted to kill me when I showed up. Then he says a strange thing. He says, therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you, meaning that they had a close relationship with a vow. But if there's guilt in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father? So he doesn't want to be killed by Saul. If Saul intends to kill David, he's asking Jonathan to do that and do the killing. Don't let your father kill me. Then Jonathan says, far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, I would tell you. Would I not tell you? So he's trying to reason with David, who I'm sure seemed quite paranoid himself at this point. David says to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? So, meaning, we've got this plan, but how are you going to let me know that that your father has become angry, if he indeed is angry? So Jonathan says to David, come, let's go out to the field. So they both went out to the field. And I'm assuming this is the same field that they're talking about from the previous chapter. Jonathan says to David in verse 12, the God of Israel be witness, when I've sent it at my father this time tomorrow or the third day. So he doesn't really know when he may have to engage with his father, and I think that's what he's referring to here. If it's well disposed toward David, then he'll let him know. But if it pleases my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away that you may go in safety. So he's making this basically a vow to David again, saying, I'm going to make sure you're safe, David, no matter what happens. If we find out Dad's not mad at you and doesn't want to kill you, it's all good. But if we find out that he is angry with you, I promise you that I will send you away for your own safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. So this is a blessing from Jonathan to David at this point, not intended as a curse as it may sound to us. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. Now this is a question to me. I don't understand if this is Jonathan understanding that David's house should rise and his should fall. Does he understand the judgment that's been brought upon the house of Saul? I really don't know. It sounds like he does, and he recognizes that David is the one who will be the benefactor of that failure of the household of Saul and the leadership role over Israel. And that he's making this covenant with David between their offspring so that they would be friends forever. Best friends forever. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies." And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. So again, we see this close relationship between Jonathan and David. Jonathan had a tremendous love toward David, and he really in no way ever intended to betray David to anything that was bad for David. Then he goes on and explains that surely tomorrow you will be missed at the table. You go hide yourself in the field where you hid yourself before and remain there, and at some point I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it as if I'm shooting at a target. And I'll send a boy out saying to the boy, "Go find the arrows." And if I say this to him, then you'll know that it's safe for you to come out. There's no danger. But if I say something else to the boy, then you'll know that there's danger and you should be on your guard. And he finishes it off by a reminder of the vow. So in verse 23, "As for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever." So this is part of this vow. So understand that there is a covenant between David and Jonathan at this point. And this will have ramifications for many, many, many chapters. So we'll see this come into play time and time again. And it says in verse 24, "So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came and the king sat down to eat," it tells the disposition of people. So Jonathan sat opposite of the king, and Abner, Saul's uncle and leader of the army, sat beside Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul didn't say anything about it the first day, saying that he had probably become ceremonially unclean and was not able to present himself as a result. But the second day comes and he's still not there. So he says to Jonathan, "Why has not the son of Jesse come to meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answers as he had agreed with David that he would, saying, "David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now if I found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason he has not come to the king's table." Saul responds, and I envision this as being almost an immediate, visceral reaction, anger kindled against Jonathan, saying, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." So Saul throws his cards on the table. He's mad. He knows that Jonathan has betrayed his own inheritance, if you will, and not being able to establish his own kingship at the appointed time. Jonathan answers, Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" And Saul hurls his spear at Jonathan, and as if to strike him. So Jonathan finally got the clue that his father was determined to put David to death. And it says in verse 34 that he rose from table in fierce anger and ate no more food that day, because he grieved for his David and because his father had disgraced him. So in verse 35, we see he gets up in the morning, goes out to the appointment in the field, shoots the arrows, tells the boy the code, and then as the boy returns with the arrows, he gives his equipment to the boy and sends him on his way. When the boy leaves and Jonathan is alone in the field, David comes out and bows before him, and it says he bows 3 times. I'm not sure what the significance of that is. And they kiss one another and weep together, David weeping the most, it says in verse 41. Jonathan says to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So this is again, it sounds like a very repetitive story. It almost sounds like the last chapter repeated. But these are distinct events. This is definitely a second event that occurs after the events in chapter 20. It's a different story, really, and it's very telling of the nature of Jonathan and the relationship between Jonathan and David. Now, before the lesson started, I put a little demark on this lesson about a discussion here, and this is where this comes in. The world would have us to believe that Jonathan had some undue homosexual relationship with David, and that, I believe, is a gross misreading of this passage. Jonathan's love toward David was a brotherly love, a love of one brother to another. He loved David as if they were one person. And again, I believe this is because something in Jonathan told Jonathan that David was going to be the next king over Israel. So why does the world say this? Well, initially I believed that they just perverted what the word was saying, but I've come to believe that it's because of this passage in this chapter that they believe this. When Saul challenges Jonathan in verse 30 and following, this is a situation that is very familiar to people of that disposition in their own families. They relate to this situation in what they call the coming out. They make this connection to angering their father, their parents, and the disgrace that their parents feel toward them because of their choices in life. This is a misreading. This is definitely Saul angry at Jonathan, not because of that, but because in Jonathan's kindness and love toward David, he's destroying his own ability to be king over Israel. This is what he means by choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness, I believe. Now, this is my opinion, and I share this as my opinion. But I in no way believe that anyone chosen by God, as David was chosen, would be in a relationship that was the way the world describes it here from this passage. So that's what I had in mind in that regard. It's truly an incredible story on the face of it, the way I understand it. Jonathan did choose David over his own kingship. His own inheritance, what he should have inherited from Saul, was not going to be his, and he knew that for some reason that the kingdom would never be his own, I believe. And he made this arrangement between himself, his family, and David's family forever because of that. And again, we will see this manifest itself down the road in the rest of the story that we read about David as he rises to the throne of Israel. I hope you found something in today's lesson that will be an encouragement or an admonition, something that will help you along the way. We will have services today at 10 a.m. I hope to see you there. Don't come if you feel sick in any way, form, or fashion. Enjoy the streaming service instead. Have a great week. God bless.